In many cultures, we find this idea that a human, as well as any living organism, is not just accumulation of molecules, but there is something more that distinguishes a living organism from non-living. In mythology, in burial rites of China, ancient Greece, India, and other cultures, there is an idea that a soul or a spirit leaves the human body at the moment of death. For example, in ancient Chinese philosophy, we find the idea that the soul is what also distinguishes the dead and the living. In this regards, it's amazing to look at the works of ancient Greeks. And they put away the moral aspect of soul, and they tried to find the scientific explanation to this idea. What is soul? Greeks believed that a substance called psykhē leaves the body at the moment of death. You can see on this vase a dying warrior, and there is like a smoke coming out of his body. A little bit about etymology of this word soul. We use word psychology, where it came from. So the word soul in Greek, you can see it says psykhē, appears first in the 8th century BC in the Homeric poem Iliad, where he used it as something that a warrior could lose in the moment of death. And here you can see the part of the poem in Greek. I'm not going to read it in Greek, but you can see underlined with red this first place that we can find this word psyche. In the 5th century, an adjective ensouled, impetuous, appeared in the ordinary Greek language, and it didn't mean having soul. It simply meant being alive. And it was applied to human beings, animals, and plants, and distinguished living from non-living. Greeks tried to answer the following questions. Is the substance soul material or not? If it is material, what it is made of? And what happens to the soul after death? So let's look at the ideas of different philosophical schools. Heraclitus, for example, believed that the soul was bodily, but composed of an unusually fine or rare kind of matter. The only difference he saw in the soul and body was the difference in degree of properties of this matter, such as mobility or fineness. Similar views we find in Epicurus. Epicurus was an atomist, and in accordance with his atomism, he believed that the soul, like everything else in the world, was composed of atoms. Atoms of what material? He said that it's atoms of some nameless kind of substance, which is responsible for our sense perception. They didn't just put the ideas, they had a good reasoning why they believed the soul to be material. They said the soul affects our body. If soul affects our body and our body composed of matter, then the soul is also material, because only similar substance can affect similar each other. In the best way, it was formulated by Stoic, as you can see on the slide. They said the soul is the body because only bodies affect one another, and soul and body do affect one another, for instance, in case of bodily damage and emotions. So that was the reasoning why it must be of some sort of material or matter. Now, another question that they tried to understand and answer was what happens to the soul after death? Here we find different views on this issue. The Stoics agreed that the human soul is mortal, but they also thought that it can survive the person's death. So it stays for a little bit and then disappears. Epicurus also believed that the soul is dispersed at death along with its atomic structure, that it loses the power that holds it in the organism. So atomic structure falls apart as soon as of the soul. Atomic structure of the soul falls apart as soon as organism dies. Pythagorean school also raised the question of what remains of a person after death. And here we find a very interesting different idea. He believed that there is a quasi-person. And that quasi-person, this quasi-person, continued to exist after we die. In famous Plato dialogues, we also find a little bit of his ideas. He believed that, you can see here the paragraph from Phaedo. They think that after it has left the body, it no longer exists anywhere, but that the soul is destroyed and dissolved on the day the man dies, like breath or smoke. So he viewed it as more like a smoke. Many centuries passed, but scientists still didn't make much progress in understanding what distinguishes living and non-living. If we look in the contemporary biophysics, according to contemporary biophysics, human organism is composed of cells, which are mainly composed of biomolecules, and the biomolecules composed of elementary particles, basically. Life is viewed as a continuous reversible. It's important, it's irreversible interactions of biomolecules. The emotions mostly attributed to hormones produced in our body. In modern physics and biology, there is no place for such thing as feelings, thoughts, or the soul. So we can see that we have to admit that the modern scientific view on human being is much poorer than that of ancient Greek philosophers. In 2016, we presented similar idea in Greece. We were invited to present it in ancient Olympia, beautiful, beautiful town. And the president of Greece, Prokopios Pavlopoulos, he was a keynote speaker, and in his welcoming speech, he said exactly that it is time, like ancient Greek philosophers, to study the soul scientifically. So recently, a new form of research, quantum biology, emerged. Quantum biology tries to describe biological systems using the tools of quantum mechanics. However, it encounters problems because quantum mechanics uses the probabilistic approach to the description of quantum system, while the processes we observe in biological organism demonstrate a high degree of determinism. It's interesting that the founder of quantum mechanics, Erwin Schrödinger, was the first who pointed out this problem that quantum mechanics was unable to describe a behavior of living matter in his book, What is Life? He wrote that in living organisms, we face with events that basically mechanism entirely different from the probability mechanisms of physics. So what is different? What is the difference between the chemistry of a living substance and non-living substance? In non-living matter, interactions occur via random collisions. While in living organisms, molecules interact under control of enzymes. enzymes. An enzyme is a protein having a particular shape. You can see at one type of enzyme on the diagram, on the picture, on the slide. An enzyme has an active site where molecules bind and undergo a chemical reaction. What's interesting is that the active site of the enzyme can only accommodate molecule having particular shape. So enzyme must be folded in the specific three-dimensional shape to accommodate the molecules. I'm not going to go into details of this process. What I want to emphasize here that this process repeats again and again from generation to generation. And there is does not exhibit any molecular chaos here. We do not observe it here. On the contrary, the molecules in a living organism act as a well-tuned mechanism. So in our view, we believe that the problems that the scientists encounter problems when they try to describe the processes in living systems because they do not include the physical vacuum in the description. If we accept the existence of the physical vacuum as a medium, it will allow us to give deterministic description of the microworld. And as a result, it will allow us to understand and to describe the processes that take place in the living organism. You can find these ideas in book Causal Interpretation of Quantum Mechanics. It will be published in the fall. The author is Nina Sotina, who is my mother and my co-author. Now I will pass the microphone to her.
Morning. In my work, I proved using the causal approach of quantum mechanics that some spatial structures are formed in the physical vacuum around an atom. Obviously, the more complex a quantum object as an atom, molecule, biomolecule, is the more complex is in the structure accompanying it in the physical vacuum. The structures accompanying a biomolecules in a living system must be different from structures accompanying non-living system. Such approach is in agreement with Evgeny Makovsky's concept of biostructure. Makovsky and his group in Romania conducted a series of experiments on plants to prove that there exists a non-molecular material structure in the physical vacuum associated with a living organism. A living plant was exposed to 200 atmosphere pressure. At this pressure, the living plant released a little amount of water and still remained alive. The same experiment was done on a dead plant. At the same pressure, 200 atmospheres, the dead plant released all the water it contained. According to contemporary biochemistry, the living matter and the dead consist of the same substance. However, it follows from Makovsky experiments, the living and dead substances are fundamentally different. Note that Makovsky's biostructure and the biofield is not the same things. Their structures, unlike field, have a defined shape. He viewed the biostructures as sponge. The term, the biological field, was introduced by Gurvich at the beginning of the 20th century. In physics, a field has a property of continuity. A special structure, on the other hand, is a system composed of elements of the arbitrary nature and has a certain shape. Oh, sorry. Here lies a difference between structures and the physical field. Despite the Makovsky experiments and other observations. Modern biology continues to develop within boundaries of molecular concept and doesn't include physical vacuum in the description. The main reason for that is the theory of relativity. Indeed, if we accept that spatial structures existed in physical vacuum, then it would be possible to link a coordinate system with the structures. This way, it would be possible to introduce an absolute motion of objects with respect to vacuum. However, it would contradict the first postulate of special relativity. Therefore, in our opinion, the theory of relativity prevents the further study of the physical vacuum. In our opinion, to understand what is life, we need to go to a final level of matter and understand the property of the physical vacuum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadia and Nina. It was a fascinating presentation. So I want to remind to tell the participants that they can put the questions in the chat, and we'll ask them, Nina and Nadia, regarding this interesting presentation. So Nina and Nadia, could you elaborate a little bit more regarding the difference between biofields and biostructures?
Field is a specific term in physics, which means something that has continuity. So it's defined, it's every point, it has a certain specific value. So unlike structures are shapes. A good example of a structure is a vortex in liquid. So liquid, we can have a liquid and then something happened and we have a vortex. So vortex is a structure in the liquid. Again, unlike field, which is something that has continuity.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarification. Any additional comments that you want to make, Nina or Nadia, regarding your presentation? Maybe an afterthought. That,
I just, again, want to use this opportunity to show that the title of the book that we plan to publish in the fall. And if you, anybody you know, interested in this topic, how it's going to explain, this book will go step by step in the development of quantum mechanics, and also will talk about how deterministic approach can lead to our better understanding of atom, and as a result, the process in living organisms. So, and here's the email. If anybody will have questions later on, they can email us. This is Nina Sotina, my mother's email.
Thank you very much. So here's an additional question from Christoph King. Is your causal interpretation of quantum mechanics deterministic, similar to the superdeterministic theories of quantum mechanics? For example, T. Hooft, 2016.
Okay, let me pass it to my mother, this question. I may translate for her because English is not her first language. We'll try to make it brief.
Of course.
Is it the same as
glasses?
Is it the same as quantum theory? Superdeterministic theory.
Имеется много разных.
No, that's not the same theory. It's because you can find more details in your book, because it will be a long discussion to go into details of the theory, but it's more consider starting from the beginning. And in her book, she derives the Schrödinger equation from the classical mechanics and shows how the Schrödinger equation actually is a condition of stability of an electron in the atom.
Okay, thank you very much, Nadia. So Stephen Hall asks us, do biofuels vibrate?
Yes, they can vibrate. It's something that needs to be studied, but yes, it's possible. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you very much. So there's an additional question.
I just want to emphasize that structures do not override biofield. It's just, we just want to emphasize in the work that by structures, because sometimes there is a confusion that biofield can affect them, but biofield is a field and structure is something that is not a field. Structure cannot be the field, but one can coexist with another.
Interesting. So there's an additional question regarding if you could please expand about the difference between living and dead plants regarding pressure, as you established in one of your slides.
Okay, let me share very quickly back. It's one of the rare experiments that were not performed anywhere else, at least as far as we know. In this experiment, what's interesting that but chemically, the dead plant, the living plant, and the dead plant is made from the same atoms, roughly speaking. And it's the same substance. However, what Markovsky showed in his experiment, that as if water in the living plant is structured, in the sense that when it was on the living plant was under high pressure of 200 atmospheres, the water state still remained there. Only a little bit of water was released, as if water had a different structure in the living. Once the plant died, it's as if the water was not structured anymore. It's just released all its water. And according to Markovsky, he believed that basically there are two forms of matter, that there's a molecular matter, but there is something else. So we believe that this something else are structures in the physical vacuum, that vacuum structured water, for example. So that when water in the living organism, it has a different structure than it has when the organism is dead. So according to Markovsky, he said again, the non-molecular biostructure that keeps the integrity of the living organism, and there is a molecular form.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. John Hufacher asks us if the work you're developing is only theoretical at the moment, or if you do have some experimental data to support your vacuum theories.
There is an interesting experiment, if anybody interested, on helium-3, superfluid helium-3, and we believe that in some properties, the physical vacuum is like helium-3. The structures can form in helium-3, which we believe similar structures can exist in physics. There is a direction in physics that study helium-3, and there are many experiments and the whole like part of physics of scientists who studied the physical vacuum as a field, as a medium. So.
Thanks a lot, Nadia. Very interesting equivalence. So probably our final question, if anyone don't ask any additional one afterwards. So Tia Musik, excuse me if I pronounce that incorrectly, asks you if you have examined the role of enzymes versus thermodynamics in biological systems.
That's a very interesting question. It's a very broad topic.
Very broad.
We did not go deep into that because we are physicists. We look at it more like try to find the physics approach to description of life, because biology and physics meets at the point of micro world. So there is no one good explanation of what happened in living organism in micro world. It's described very well non-living, but we see it does not describe the living substances, the living organisms, biomolecules. But that's a very good question. No, we did not really study that.
Okay, thank you very much, Nadia. Thank you very much, Nina. I think you'll be able to ask Nina and Nadia additional questions. But for that, let's pass the microphone to our program chair, John Cruz, so he can tell us more about it.
Thank you, Ramses, and thank you very much for the presentation. It's very interesting, coming from different perspectives, and I love that we're able to integrate different cultural perspectives.